adding and subtracting fractions. In previous grades, you've added and subtracted fractions with common denominators. To review this, I'm going to quickly show two examples. So here we have 5 as the common denominator, which is the bottom number. We keep it the same number, and then we simply just add the top numbers. So that gives us 3 out of 5. Next, we do the exact same thing for subtraction. The bottom number is the same, so we keep it as 10. And then the top number is 3 and 1, so we take 3, subtract 1. We get 2 out of 10. This is how we can simply add and subtract fractions with common denominators. Now let's look at fractions with different denominators. Here we have 7 and 8. So what is it with a common denominator? It is essentially the same thing as finding a common multiple. That's why we went over the lesson of GCF and LCM before going into fractions. One method that will always help you find the common multiple would be to multiply the two bottom numbers together. So 7 times 8, that is 56. 56 is a common multiple for 7 and 8. Now, in this case, it just so happens that it's also the lowest common multiple, but sometimes that may not be the case. We will be looking at an example afterwards for that. So here we have 7 times 8 gives us 56. Whatever we do to the bottom fraction, we have to do the same thing to the top fraction. So we're going to take 8 and multiply it by 5. So we now have 40. Next, we have 8 times 7 gives us 56. Whatever I do to the bottom number, I have to do the same thing to the top number. So that's 1 times 7, which gives me 7. So after I add the top numbers, I now have 47 out of 56. Now, since 47 is already a prime number, I know that this is already the simplest form, and I don't need to reduce it any further. Next, let's look at a question where you can multiply the two numbers to find a common multiple, which in this case is 100. But this is not the lowest common multiple. So I will show you how both methods reach the same answer. So 5 times 20 gives me 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do the same thing to the top. So I have 60 plus. Over here, I have 20 times 5 gives me 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So that gives me 20 for the top number here. 60 plus 20, that gives me 80 out of 100. Now, both of these numbers can be divided by 20. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom number by 20 to give me 4 out of 5. Now, what if I went with the lowest common multiple? So the lowest common multiple for 5 and 20 is 20. 5 times 4 gives me 20. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do the same thing to the top. So I get 12 for taking 4 times 3. Next, I look at 20. 20 times 1 gives me 20. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do the same thing to the top. 4 times 1 gives me 4. So I'm going to add 4 over here. 12 plus 4, that gives me 16 out of 20. Now, 16 divided by 4, that gives me 4. 20 divided by 4, that gives me 5. As you can see, you get the exact same answer. But there's a slightly more work with this one because I'm dealing with larger numbers. Now let's take a look at subtraction. Subtraction works in a very similar way. Again, we are looking for a common denominator. So here, the common denominator is 56. Whatever I do to the bottom number, I do the same thing to the top number. I take 4 times 8, gives me 56. 7 times 8 gives me 56. And then 5 times 8 gives me 40. 8 times 7 gives me 56. 1 times 7 gives me 7. 40 subtract 7 gives me 33 out of 56. Now, I know that this number is divisible by 3 and 11. However, 56 is not divisible by 11 and it's not divisible by 3. So I know that this is already the simplest form. Next, 3 out of 5 subtract 4 out of 20. Again, I'm going to use the lowest common multiple for this one so that I reduce the number of work I need to do. 5 times 4 gives me 20. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do the same thing to the top. So 4 times 3 gives me 12. Subtract. 20 times 1 gives me 20. 4 times 1 gives me 4. So now I have 8 out of 20. 8 is divisible by 4. 20 is divisible by 4. And then now I get 2 out of 5.